My aunt pretended not to see when her husband came into my room and did whatever he wanted to me. My name is Cassie. I'm 81 years old today, and I'm from Millersville in rural Tennessee, a little town that looks like it's straight out of a postcard, but hides more secrets than a tombstone in an old cemetery. And look, if I'm talking here, it's not because it got easy. It's because keeping quiet for a lifetime gets tiring. And sometimes, my dear, the pain only goes away when you let it out. So if you've made it this far, leave your like, my dear, because what lies ahead... Look, even Mexican soap operas don't have those. I was young when I began to understand that too much affection from adults sometimes came in a twisted form, that tight hugs can suffocate, and that there are people who smile just to cover up the dirt. It was summer, 1954, and my mother had been admitted to a hospital far away. They said she needed a break from everything, but nobody explained that everything was me. My Aunt Linda, my father's sister, took me. She was one of those church women, with a flowery, knee-length dress, her hair pinned up in a sweet way that made you want to lie on her lap. She took me in, saying that she would look after me like a daughter. But if only I had known what it meant to be a daughter in that house. Her husband, Gary, was a big man, the kind where, when you arrive, even the clock seems to stop. He worked in a car workshop and lived with his hands dirty with grease and his voice thick. At first, he didn't talk to me much. He would pat me like an uncle and ask how school had been. He had a long look on his face, which I only understood many years later. But it was on a muggy night at the end of summer that everything started to turn sour. I was sleeping in a small room with a spring bed that creaked even in the wind. And that night, my aunt said she was going to bed early and that Gary would be in the living room watching TV. I remember it very well because she kissed me on the forehead, smoothed out my sheet, and said, "Sleep well, darling." Her kiss was still burning my face when I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, slow, like someone who knows exactly where they're stepping, like someone who's done it before. The doorknob turned slowly. I froze. I pretended to sleep like a child does when they don't know what to do. The mattress sank and the air in the room became heavy. He didn't speak. He just breathed deeply. And then he got up, left, and the silence returned. The next day, my aunt woke me up with pancakes. She said I looked pale. She ran a hand through my hair and asked if I'd had a bad dream. I wanted to tell her I really did, but my tongue was stuck. Then she said that Gary had gone to the workshop early, that he was a good man, a hard worker, that he loved me. He adored me. That's when I began to understand that I was alone. That was the first time. After that, it became routine. Every time my aunt went to bed early, I knew. And Gary, he just waited for silence. The silence of the house, the silence of his wife, the silence of my mouth and my aunt. My aunt. She called me my little girl, gave me dresses, took me to church, made me pray on my knees. But she never asked why I woke up with a wet sheet and red eyes. She pretended. Pretending was her way of surviving. And I, small as I was, learned to pretend too. Time went by. And the pain? Oh, the pain was no longer just in the body. It was that pain of the soul that nobody sees. Because it wasn't just what happened at night. It was the next day, the table set, the two of them laughing, talking about God, and me there, eating slowly, wanting to disappear. I know that to anyone listening now, it sounds like something out of a horror movie, but back in 1954, in a little town like Millersville, nobody talked about it. Nobody wanted to know. And what about me? I was just a kid who learned to smile to survive. But let me tell you something, honey. This story is just beginning, because what I experienced there, in that house, will still make you hold your breath. In the next part, I'll tell you what happened the day he came in with a present and said it was just our little secret, just ours. If you've made it this far, leave me a like. Every like is like a hug for this old lady. And tell me where you're hearing this story from. My chest is tight today, you see. That week, my aunt had started working a new shift at the roadside diner. She left early, came back late, and always said that I could sleep peacefully, that she left the porch light on. So you wouldn't be afraid, my flower. Afraid? If she only knew that it wasn't the darkness that made me shiver. It was the door opening slowly, the creak of the wood, the smell of cigarettes mixed with gasoline. It was him, always him, waiting for the house to sink into silence. On Thursday, just after dinner, he came home early from work. I was washing the dishes, standing on a stool to reach the sink. He leaned against the kitchen door frame and stood there looking at me. "You're getting younger," she said. I pretended not to hear. I washed faster. My hands were shaking so much that one of the plates slipped and broke on the floor. I froze. But he didn't shout. He just whistled. And that's when I realized that danger came with a smile. When it was time to go to bed, Auntie said goodnight in her usual calm way. She tucked in the blanket, turned off the light, and left. About 30 minutes later, I heard footsteps. It always started like that. But that night, he didn't go straight in. He opened the door slowly, turned on the light, and stood there with a paper bag in his hand. It seemed like a silly thing, but my stomach turned instantly. I knew it wasn't a real present. "I brought it for you." He threw the bag on the bed. "But don't tell your aunt, huh?" Our little secret. Inside was a doll. One of those fairground dolls with woolly hair and button eyes. Nice, too. And that's when I felt like crying. Not because of the doll, but because there, at that moment, I understood that he thought I had a price. That a piece of cloth with eyes could erase everything he did. He sat down next to me. He spoke softly, close to my ear. Words that today, even over 80 years old, I can't repeat. But you know, right? There are things you feel in your body and soul at the same time. This time, I didn't pretend to be asleep. I turned to the corner of the bed, hugged the doll. I stayed still. I let it happen. Because if I resisted, it would be worse. I learned that quickly in that house. The next morning, my aunt called me in for coffee. There were pancakes, orange juice. Everything was beautiful, as if nothing had happened. And she, all pleased, said, "I'm glad Gary's getting attached to you. He said he gave you a present yesterday. He was thrilled." "Look, my sister would love to see you like this. I wanted to run away, but I just smiled." Because we learn, my child. You learn that sometimes smiling is the only way to survive in a place where no one wants to listen. I started avoiding home. I spent more time at school. I came home late. I'd sit on the sidewalk until dark, pretending I hadn't noticed the time passing. Only he noticed too. And one evening, while I was washing my uniform in the sink, he leaned against the laundry door and said, "Aunt Linda's finding you rebellious, huh? You're not being a good girl. Good girl." That's how he put it. A good girl if she kept quiet. A good girl if she accepted the gift. A good girl if she pretended it didn't hurt. On Sunday, we went to church. It was the first time in weeks that the three of them had gone together. Auntie proud, him with his Bible in his hand, me with my stomach in knots. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, about secrets that God sees. I almost got up to shout, but I didn't. I just sat there praying quietly to a God who, at the time, I thought was asleep. It wasn't until Monday that things changed. The school teacher called me after class. She looked at me with a worried look, but without being direct. "Cassie, are you okay? Is everything all right at home?" I shook my head. I said yes. She sighed. She gave me a light hug, but she didn't insist. No one ever insisted. That night, he didn't come. Perhaps because my face no longer hid it so well. Maybe because he noticed that I wasn't shaking so much. But the pause wasn't relief. It was just preparation for the next blow. The following weekend, there was a visitor, a cousin of Gary's with his wife. The house was full, and he made a point of showing me how smart, gifted, almost like a daughter I was. The others laughed. They thought it was cute. Nobody saw his eyes when nobody was looking. After they left, he came into the room with a box of sweets. Again, that little secret. But I didn't take it. I just stood there, mute. "What do you think?" He threw the box on my bed. "Let me remind you that I'm in charge here." He didn't say another word. He left, slamming the door. And I stood there looking at the sweets as if they were time bombs. Because everything in that house was like that. There was a price. There was a scare. There was a threat in disguise. My aunt never asked, but she began to notice that I was avoiding Gary. One day, she called me into the kitchen. She asked in a sweet way, "You look different. Has something happened?" I almost said it. Almost. But when I saw her eyes, I didn't see strength. I saw fear. Fear of facing what she already knew. So I shook my head. She nodded. She went back to the stove. Sometimes those who pretend not to see have seen too much. The day my mother came back was one of the weirdest days of my life. There was no tight hug, no reunion tears, just an icy silence that, even on a hot day, sent shivers down my spine. She got out of the car with a small suitcase and her face half gone. Her eyes? They looked empty, as if they had been left there in hospital, along with the years she had lost. I ran to her with my heart pounding. I wanted her lap. I wanted, and I'm sorry I went. But she just ran her hand through my hair without looking at me, like someone who greets a stranger on the street. My aunt was excited. She made a cake, decorated the table with flowers. She talked loudly and smiled. She said that now everything would go back to normal, as if normal was that house where the walls knew too much and nobody said anything. My mother spent the rest of the afternoon sitting on the sofa, twiddling her thumbs. She didn't even ask how I was. She didn't even want to know about school or the drawings I'd done while she was away. She seemed disconnected, almost absent. Gary kept to himself, but with that look in his eyes, that look. The first night, she slept in the guest room. I was surprised. I thought, well, why didn't she go to bed with her sister? I only understood later. When my aunt asked him to share her room so as not to disturb his sister's adjustment. Yes, dear, the house became smaller with her presence, but no safer. On the third day, she asked me to sit in the yard. We stared at nothing, until she said, very slowly, "Did Linda take good care of you?" I wanted to say everything. I wanted to open my mouth and spit out the choked years. But when I saw that weak look on her face, I realized there was no point. So I shook my head and mumbled, "Yes, ma'am." She nodded. Then she said something that stuck with me. "We need to be grateful. They took us in at a difficult time. Don't forget that." Took us in, of course, with a kiss on the forehead and hell to follow. But I kept quiet, as always. The days went by. My mother spent more time in bed than on her feet. Sometimes she cried quietly in the bathroom. Sometimes she laughed out loud, and between one crisis and another, she pretended that everything was in order. One afternoon, between sips of tea, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of guilt and fear. "Gary, he's nice to you, isn't he?" My blood ran cold. I choked on my answer. It took me so long to react that she answered for me. "He seems to like you. He even gave you a present." That's when I realized. She knew. Not everything, perhaps, but she knew enough, and yet she didn't move. From then on, I began to notice her more. The quick glances she threw when he passed, the way she squeezed the napkin in her hand, the voice that faltered when she called him to the table. My mother wasn't blind, she was a prisoner, just like me. One night, I overheard a muffled argument, she and my aunt, the two of them locked in the kitchen. Harsh words. "Are you sure? It's her imagination. She'll ruin everything." And then silence. The next day, nothing was said. Nothing was explained, but you could cut the tension with a knife. I went back to sleep, locking the bedroom door. It didn't do much good, but it gave me a false sense of control, and I needed any crumb of peace. One Saturday morning, my mother disappeared. All she left was a note. "I need some time. I'll be back when I can." My heart sank. Again. Without warning, no explanation. It disappeared like the first time. Auntie said it was a nervous breakdown, that she'd show up soon, that I'd better focus on my studies, on church, on good things. Gary? He didn't even comment. He just continued with the gifts, the glances, the nocturnal steps. It was then that I decided it was no use. I couldn't wait to be rescued by anyone. I began to collect coin by coin. I took change from the bakery. I picked up pennies from the sofa. I kept them under my sock drawer. A timid plan, but it was what I had. At school, I asked a classmate where the nearest bus station was. She thought I was going to visit relatives. She smiled and said, There's one in Ashland City. It's half an hour away. That was all I needed. But before I could scrape together enough money, something changed. My aunt woke me up in the middle of the night. She was pale, trembling. Her eyes were wide. "He's different," she said. "He's been acting strange these days." I didn't say anything. I just looked. She stared back at me. "Cassie, hasn't he ever done anything?" I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. She sat on the edge of my bed. She took my hand. She cried softly. "I thought I was looking after you, that I was saving you. And maybe I just threw you in the cage." It was the first time I'd heard an apology that didn't come with the exact words, but it came with truth. The next morning, she tried to make pancakes. She burned everything. She laughed nervously. I helped. And there, between flour and hidden tears, something began to change. But it was only the beginning, because Gary felt the change in the air. And a man like that, when he realizes he's losing control, becomes a beast. That day, my stomach turned before I even left the house. It hadn't been a night of peace or torment. It was the kind of night when you sleep with one eye open and the other pretending to rest. But I still grabbed my backpack and went. I left earlier than usual. I didn't want to bump into him in the living room, nor did I want to look at my aunt's face, which was painted with guilt, and still tried to act as if everything was under control. I walked to the bus stop with a hurried pace, as if I could run away from everything with just the rhythm of my feet. The school was in an old building, but it was my refuge. No one asked too many questions. The teachers, when they noticed something strange, preferred to turn away. But even in this half-blind world, I felt more like a person than I did at home. That morning, one of the girls remarked that she had seen a truck stopped on the corner of the school. She smiled and said it was an old flirt waiting for a wife in town. I didn't pay any attention. I was too busy pretending to be normal. Until at break time, I saw it. It was him. Leaning against the car, arms crossed, cigarette lit, staring at me. My body froze. The room seemed to spin, but my legs kept moving. I pretended not to see. I pretended it was a coincidence. I even pretended it didn't exist, if I had to. On the way home, he didn't say anything. He just opened the front door and let me in. His silence spoke louder than any sermon. I sat on the sofa with my heart racing. Auntie didn't even show up. She must have been at church or pretending to weed the yard. And he unhurriedly bent down in front of me, looked right into my eyes, and let go. "Did you think you could fool me?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. Those words were like poison. I cringed. My breathing started to fail. He laughed. He stood up and whistled as if he had just told a joke. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there on the school sidewalk, staring like a hunter who knows where his prey is going to run. The next day, I made up that I was ill. Auntie didn't insist. She left me in bed and went to work. The problem was that he stayed too. He said he was going to repair the back fence, but he didn't even pick up any tools. He just walked around the house, stepping hard, opening drawers, closing cupboards. Sometimes he stopped at my bedroom door and stood there. He didn't go in. I just watched, as if marking my territory. The fear was no longer just nocturnal. It had become daily, and I realized that he was trying to bend me again, the way he used to, only now. Something in me wasn't so weak anymore. On Wednesday afternoon, I received a note from the teacher. She called me in at break time and handed it over quietly. It said that the principal wanted to talk to me. I went with my heart in my hand. The principal was a serious woman, not one to smile easily. She looked at me like she already knew half the story. She said that one of the school's neighbors had called, worried. They had noticed that older man coming in twice in a row, standing in his car looking at the courtyard. She asked, "Do you know this man, Cassie?" And for the first time, I hesitated. I almost lied. I almost said he was a relative, but something stopped. I swallowed and whispered, "That's my aunt's husband." The woman frowned. She asked more, and I said the least. I didn't tell her what he did, but I said that I didn't like being followed, that I felt strange around him, that sometimes he said strange things. She was quiet for a few seconds. She picked up the phone. She called my aunt. The conversation was short. I only heard her part. "Linda, we need to talk. Your niece felt uncomfortable with your husband's behavior." "Yes, that's right. A visit here would be important." I went back to the living room on shaky legs. I knew there would be consequences, and it did. At home, when Auntie arrived, the mood had changed. She wouldn't look me in the eye. We had dinner in silence. Gary arrived later, his face closed. He didn't speak to me, or to her, but I knew. I knew the price would come, and it did. In the early hours of the morning, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door being forced. I couldn't scream. Fear paralyzed me. But she appeared, my aunt, her eyes red, her hair loose, and a kitchen knife in her hand. "Go to your room! Now!" she growled at him like a cornered animal. He backed away. He cursed, said she was crazy, but she was. And I, there in the dark, listened to the two of them arguing quietly for hours. The next day, he disappeared. He left early without saying where he was going. He was gone for 2 days. The house felt lighter, but it was that lightness that comes before the storm. My aunt didn't say anything to me. She just cleaned the kitchen, as if that would erase the last few years. And it was in this gap that I began to really plan my escape. I met Shirley in the school library. She was one of those women who seemed to live among books, but whose heart was open to anyone who wanted to talk. She wore big glasses and colorful scarves around her neck, and whenever she spoke, it seemed like she had all the time in the world to listen. I liked spending my break time in there. It was the only place where no one demanded anything of me, where silence wasn't a threat. It was shelter. One day, without saying a word, she sat down next to me, put a brown envelope on the table, and said quietly, "If you ever need it." "Really? Here's an address." I looked at her strangely. I didn't know if it was a warning, help, or just a coincidence. She just smiled, got up, and went back to organizing her books as if nothing had happened. I put the envelope in my backpack, but didn't open it right away. It was like carrying dynamite. Any movement could blow everything up. That night, when I got home, I felt a strange atmosphere. Auntie was quiet. Gary was gone again. I sat on the kitchen chair and stared at the floor until she appeared with a tired expression on her face. "He's going away for a while. He said he needed to think." Her voice came out weak, but without tears. I nodded, not daring to ask any more. It could just be a truce. And a truce, my child, is not victory. It's just a break in the war. I opened the envelope, hiding in the bathroom. There was a piece of paper with typed letters, the address of a foster home in Nashville, the name of the person in charge, the telephone number. It was real. It was possible. And suddenly, everything seemed closer. I spent the next few days rehearsing a way out. I calculated the steps, the times, how long the bus would take. The coins were hidden in a corner of the cupboard, wrapped in an old cloth. Every night I counted. Every night I was a little short. Even so, I went to the bus station on Saturday. The small backpack on my back, the folded envelope in my pants pocket. My heart was beating so loudly it sounded like a drum. I got to the ticket office and asked for my ticket. The girl looked at me suspiciously. She asked, "Do you have a permit, young lady?" I pretended to look in my bag. I said I'd forgotten it. I walked slowly back to the sidewalk. I sat down on the curb, and I cried. But it wasn't sadness. It was anger. Anger at not being old enough to decide for myself. Anger at being trapped by rules that didn't really protect me. It took me a while to get home. I walked aimlessly through streets I didn't know. I wanted to disappear. I wanted someone to see me and ask, "Is everything okay?" But nobody asked. Nobody ever asks when it matters most. When I arrived, my aunt was on the balcony. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Those eyes, for the first time, didn't judge me. They seemed to understand. "You went there, didn't you?" she said softly. I didn't answer. She got up, went inside, and came back with a small package in her hands. She put it on my lap. "This is from when your mother still lived here. Letters, notes, things she never wanted to throw away." I opened it carefully. There were scribbled notebooks, folded notes, a diary. I began to read slowly, and there, between the crooked lines, I understood a lot. My mother had also tried to escape. She had also planned, counted coins, written goodbyes. But she gave up, always at the last minute, always paralyzed by fear. In one passage she wrote, "It's worse to stay, but it's scarier to leave. Here at least I know where it hurts." That went through me like a knife. I put everything away again. I only left a separate note, a yellowed piece of paper on which she said, "Cassie is my piece of hope. If one day she makes it out, maybe I'll forgive myself for not going." I read it 10 times. Then I went to bed and stayed up all night, without thinking about a plan. No fear, just sure that I didn't want to be like her. The next day, Shirley called me into the library again. This time, she didn't give me an envelope. She just asked, "Are you going to try again?" I nodded. She smiled. She said she would help. She showed me the way to the furthest bus stop, which didn't require a permit for minors. She gave me a map, a bit of money hidden inside a book cover. It was a code between us. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but when it is, be ready. Courage grew in me like a small flame. I was still shaking, but it was already burning. I knew the time would come. All that was missing was the right moment. And when he came back gentler. He pretended that nothing had happened. He said good morning, asked about school. He put his hand on my shoulder and said he missed me. A kind of calm that only made me more alert, because I knew that false peace was the harbinger of the next fall. There was no sound of a storm that morning. The sky was clear, as if to deceive. He'd come back 2 days earlier. He came in quietly, sat down at the table, and ate as if he had just gone out to buy bread. His aunt made coffee, wiped down the counter, pretended to be normal with a precision that was even envious. But I saw it, the way she hunched her shoulders when he approached, the way she avoided crossing eyes. She also knew that the calm wouldn't last. That night I locked myself in my room as usual, but I slept lightly. I dreamt of buses, roads, and unknown voices calling my name. When I woke up, my heart was still beating fast, as if I already knew what was coming. The day dragged on. At school, I couldn't pay attention to anything. Shirley noticed. She pulled me into the corridor and asked if it was time. "I'm close," I replied, "but it's not today yet." She didn't insist. She handed me an apple and a napkin with a number scribbled on it. "Call if you need to," she wrote. I put it away like someone who hides a prison key. I took the long way home. I kept turning around just to postpone the moment. When I arrived, I realized that his truck wasn't in the garage. His aunt, alone in the kitchen, was stirring the pot with a distant expression. "He's out hunting," she said without raising her head. "He should be back late." I nodded. I went upstairs, took off my shoes, and sat on the bed. Only then did I realize that my hands were sweaty, even in the cold afternoon. I stayed there, staring at the ceiling until it got dark. The open window let in the smell of wet bushes, and it reminded me of my mother's backyard when she still laughed easily. Far away, a dog barked. Then silence. I heard the truck arrive. The engine turned off slowly. Heavy footsteps, front door opening, a low voice in the living room, Auntie trying to sound firm. He responded with a short laugh, all too familiar. The noise stopped. Then came the footsteps, the ones I could recognize with my eyes closed. Up the stairs, slowly, one at a time. The latch on my door moved, but it was locked. He pushed once. He didn't insist. He stood there for long seconds, and then he spoke. "Cassie, open up. I just want to talk." My throat went dry. I took a deep breath, but didn't answer. "I've done a lot of thinking these days, and I realize that you're special, much more than any other girl." The words came softly, but they oozed poison. I listened and shivered, but not from fear, of disgust, of guarded hatred. We can solve this in our own way, without anyone interfering. I remained silent. The silence outweighed any screams. He waited a little longer. He knocked lightly on the door. "Can you hear me?" I stood up slowly. I moved closer. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood, and I whispered, Don't ever talk to me again." There was an instant of pure silence. Then there were hurried footsteps coming downstairs. The door slammed, glass breaking, Auntie's voice shouting something I didn't understand. I stood there, not moving a muscle. The next morning, he wasn't there. Auntie looked at me differently, as if she had finally seen the whole of me. She sat on my bed and took my hand tightly. "Go away." I was startled. She'd never said that with such certainty. "You've been here too long," she continued. "Go and live. Be free, before this place devours you for good." I didn't cry. I didn't hug. I just nodded. In my backpack, I put 3 outfits: Shirley's envelope, the napkin, and the photo of my mother smiling when she was still young. I went downstairs with my heart pounding. Auntie gave me some change, and an apple just like the one Shirley had given me the day before. "If anyone asks," she said, "I'm the one who took you to visit a cousin. Don't worry, I'll take care of things." And so I did. I left the house before sunrise. The sky was still stained dark blue, with a few stray wisps of cloud, and the ground was damp with serenity. My feet weighed more than my backpack. It was as if the body wanted to walk, but the soul looked back. Auntie didn't sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen chair with the radio on very quietly. When I passed her, she didn't say anything. She just handed me a small bag with a sandwich wrapped in a napkin, a bottle of water, and the money hidden at the bottom of her market bag. The silence between us was the last hug. The walk to the bus stop was long. It took more than 40 minutes on foot, and the bus Shirley had mentioned ran only once a day. If I missed it, I didn't get a second chance. Every step was a challenge. His hands were sweating from the cold. His heart was pounding like a hammer. But the fear of staying was greater than the dread of leaving. The city was still asleep. Closed houses, dark windows, no dogs on the street. Just me, my thoughts, and the backpack on my back. I remembered my mother, the note I'd found in her notebook. If she manages to get out, maybe I'll forgive myself. That pushed me forward more than any courage. I arrived at the stop early. A wooden bench, a crooked sign, and that screaming emptiness. I sat down. I hugged my knees. I waited. The road seemed endless. Every passing car made me cringe. I thought he might appear at any moment, that someone would shout my name, that everything would fall apart right there. But time passed. And then, in the middle of that morning silence, the bus came around the bend. Slow, noisy, almost like an old bug that had come to pick me up. I stood up. The driver opened the door without saying anything. I got on with my hand trembling. I handed over the money, afraid of making a mistake. He took a quick look, shrugged, and drove on. I sat in the penultimate row, next to the window, my backpack on my lap, my eyes glued to the glass. As the city receded into the distance, I felt something I'd never experienced before: lightness. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, as if you spend so much time carrying weight that when you let go, you no longer know how to walk straight. I saw the fields, the posts, and the fences rushing by. Every kilometer was a piece of the past that I was leaving behind. Every bend in the road was a promise of a new beginning. But starting over, my child, isn't as pretty as in the movies. It's scary. I arrived in Nashville around 9 in the morning. Lots of people, a lot of noise, too much going on at the same time. I felt tiny. I took the paper with Shirley's address. I asked a lady selling fruit at a makeshift stall. She pointed in the right direction with a quick smile, like someone who sees a lost child trying to look grown up. I walked for another 20 minutes. My legs ached. My stomach rumbled. But my head, all I could think was, it'll work out. The house was simple, with a blue door and a sign at the entrance. Emily Grace Support Center. I rang the doorbell without the courage to breathe. A red-haired woman with a steady gaze opened the door. She asked my name. I said it quietly. "Cassie?" She nodded, unsurprised, as if she had expected me. Walking in was like stepping through a portal. It smelled of coffee, fresh bread, and something I didn't recognize at the time. Then I understood. It was security. She led me to a small room with a bunk bed, flowered curtains, and a desk with a notebook and crayons. "You're staying here for now," she said. "We have rules, but the first is simple. Nobody touches you without permission." I cried. Not from sadness, not from joy. It was a cry that came from the soul. It washed away the parts of me that I didn't even know still hurt. I spent the first few days not talking much. The other girls would come over to talk, but my voice seemed to have lost its quality. The red-haired woman, who I later learned was called Margie, respected my silence. Talking takes time. We wait. I started to draw. Loose things. Dolls without faces. Houses with locked doors. Twisted trees. That's what came out. Nobody charged me anything. One afternoon, Margie sat down next to me. She picked up one of the drawings. She said she liked the colors. There was pain there, but also strength. "You already have a name for strong people," she commented. "Cassie is the name of someone who can take more than she should." I remained silent, but inside, a part of me hugged myself. There, in that place, I learned that I wasn't the only one, that many girls arrived like me, with their bodies here, but their souls hidden. Time in the shelter passed slowly, but it passed. It wasn't happiness, but it wasn't prison either. It was like being in a place between two worlds, the one that hurt me and the one I still didn't know how to live in. As the days went by, my routine turned into silence. I woke up early, ate with the other girls, and took part in activities. There were classes, a psychologist, an art workshop. Everyone there carried something on their shoulders, so no one judged the weight of the other. The pain was common. It just changed its name. One Tuesday, Margie appeared in the room where I was painting. She called me into the corner. She handed me a crumpled envelope with no sender, but with my name on the front. That was enough to make my blood run cold. I opened it slowly. My hands trembled. My stomach turned. It was from my mother. "Cassie, I don't know where to start." That's how it began. And every next line was a piece of her trying to sew up what had been torn for a long time. She said she missed me, that she'd heard I'd left, that the whole town was talking about it. She said she loved me, that he was trying to get better, that he wanted to see me. In the end, the blow came. "Can you ever forgive me?" I closed the letter angrily. I didn't cry right then. I couldn't. I was dry inside. I went to the bedroom, sat on the floor, and stared at the wall. I remembered the day she left me with her aunt. The first time, she didn't come back. The second time, she ran away. I remembered the look on her face when I asked about Gary, and she looked away. I remembered the silence, how much it hurt. And now she was coming to ask for forgiveness? 3 days went by, and I didn't say a word. Margie noticed. She kept me quiet. Only once did she comment. Sometimes you want an apology, but when it comes, it's too late. The letter went round and round in my head. Each sentence hurt me, as if it had just happened. But along with the anger came something else, an old desire to go back to that time when everything could still be different. The following week, another letter arrived, this time with an address, a phone number, an invitation. "If you like, we can talk. Just the two of us." I thought about calling. I wrote a reply and tore it up. I wrote it again. I tore it up again. It was like trying to pull out what was stuck to the flesh. I told Margie. She didn't have an opinion. She said I had to decide for myself. No one could tell me what to do with an old wound. "You don't have to forgive. You just need to understand what still hurts," she said. I started to write a letter back, not as an answer, but as an outburst. I wrote everything down. How I felt when she left me, the fear that consumed me at night, the way I got used to pretending, how I felt invisible even to her. I wrote without thinking about sending it. When I finished, I tore it up too, because everything was already out of my mind, and that was enough for now. Months passed. She sent 2 more letters. The words changed, but the tone was always the same, regret and hope. Then one day, a photograph arrived. It was my mother sitting on a bench in the square, holding a portrait of me as a child. Behind the photo, there was just one handwritten sentence. "Are you still my little girl?" It disarmed me. For the first time, I cried for her, not for her absence, but for everything that could have been. That night, I stayed up late. I thought about everything I'd experienced. Gary, Auntie, the silence, at school, Shirley, on the bus, Margie, the girl who left Millersville with fear in her eyes and courage hidden in her pants pocket. And I thought, is it worth going back? Just to hear her voice? Just to see if she's changed? Just to see if we can rebuild a little peace? The next day, I asked to use the center's phone. I called. She called 4 times. She answered on the 5th. Her voice was shaky. Hello? I was silent for seconds. Then she said, "It's me." She didn't answer. On the other side, only the sound of her breathing. I didn't come back. I just wanted to hear you, I added. Silence. Then came a cry. Low, sore. "I'm so happy to hear your voice," I said at last. We stayed there, quiet, until I hung up. Not out of anger, but because it was enough. It was a gray Sunday, one of those Sundays when the sky seems to carry the same weight that we carry inside. The house was quiet. The girls were scattered around, some playing cards, others reading quietly. I was in the living room, scribbling in a notebook, when Margie rushed in. Her gaze swept over me. That was all it took for me to know that something was coming. "Cassie, there's someone at the gate. Say it's your aunt." My heart stopped for a moment. Then it raced as if it wanted to burst out of my mouth. I didn't ask which aunt. I already knew. I stood up slowly. My feet were heavy as lead. My throat was dry. I walked to the window. She was there, in a dark dress, her hair tied up as usual, and that look that only she had, firm on the outside, broken on the inside. "Do you want me to say you're not?" Margie whispered next to me. I shook my head. I opened the gate with a trembling hand. We stood face to face. She looked smaller, more tired. Time had passed for her too, but her eyes hadn't changed. They still carried the silence of everything she had never had the courage to say. "Cassie," was all she said. I nodded. I didn't smile. I didn't hug her. I just moved out of the way so she could come in. Margie served coffee. Auntie refused. We sat on the bench on the veranda, one on each side. The distance seemed longer than the time we hadn't seen each other. "He's gone for good." My voice came out low, almost a breath. I remained silent. "He sold the truck, disappeared from town. Nobody's seen him since. I think I'm the last one to know anything about him. The news brought me nothing. No relief, no sadness. Just a strange feeling of emptiness." She looked down at the floor. Her hands moved restlessly, as if to hold back the words that were escaping. "When you left, I thought it would be liberating. That this was what you needed. And it was, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. The sound of leaves dancing in the yard filled the space between us. "I got a letter from your mother." The sentence came without warning. "She said you called, that you cried." I looked up. Now it hurt. "She's different, Cassie. She wanted to meet me. She talked about you, about how wrong you were, how she lost herself before she even tried to protect you." I swallowed. "And you?" I asked. "Protected?" She shivered. "I thought I was. I swear I thought I was. But now I know I only closed my eyes tighter, because seeing it hurt too much. For a moment I saw in her the woman who raised me, who combed my hair on Sunday mornings, who sang hymns out of tune, but also the one who turned her face away, who handed me over to him every time she locked her bedroom door. "What do you want, Auntie?" She was slow to answer. "I just wanted to see you, to see if you're all right, and maybe ask for forgiveness." I let out a sigh, because there, at that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't the problem. The problem was everything that came before. Everything I had to swallow in order to be there today, standing firm, talking. "I don't know if I can. Not yet." She nodded. She reached into her handbag. She took out a crumpled envelope. "Your mother wrote again. She asked me to deliver it. It's here, if you like." I took it, but I didn't open it. I put it in my pants pocket. Fear still lived inside, and I had no room for it that day. Auntie stood up. She looked around. "This place is safe." More than I was. I couldn't speak. I just followed her to the gate. Before she left, she turned to me with her eyes full of water. "We carry guilt too, Cassie, even when you don't say it, even when you pretend you've forgotten." I stood there, watching her walk away until she turned the corner. I went back inside with a lump in my throat. Margie was waiting for me. "Are you all right?" I nodded, but my chest was heavy. "Do you want to talk?" "Not now, but maybe later." I went into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed. I took the envelope out of my pocket. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't open it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept remembering the things that weren't said, of the pain that had been released, and of what was to come. It took me 2 days to touch that envelope again. I stared at it on the shelf like someone staring at a wild animal. I knew it could bite, but I also knew that if I didn't open it, I would carry that doubt with me for the rest of my life. At dawn on the second day, I sat on the floor of my room. The other girls were asleep. I picked up the envelope slowly. I tore the edge carefully, as if to avoid waking the ghosts that lived inside. The letter was handwritten, like all the others, but this time it had a firmer line, as if she, my mother, finally knew what she wanted to say. "Cassie, if you're reading this, it's because you didn't throw it away. Thank you for that." I started shaking from the first line. "I know you have every right to hate me, but even so, I needed to tell you what I could never say looking into your eyes." She was talking about her childhood, how she too had been raised in fear of loneliness, of a forced marriage. She said that when she got pregnant with me, she thought everything would change, that I would be the missing light, but her head was already too full of darkness. "I left you with Linda because I thought she was stronger, because in truth, I was already too broken to take care of anyone else." The words came like a blow, but at the same time, they began to make sense. When I realized what was happening, my shame was greater than my instinct as a mother. I hated myself for every time I closed my eyes, for every silence I let take the place of a scream. She said she ran away out of cowardice, not to cure herself. That hospitalization was the excuse they gave her. But deep down, she was just hiding. "I don't expect your forgiveness, my child. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be someone better. Not for me, but for you, even if it's too late." I folded the letter with my hands wet from crying. I didn't know whether to feel angry, sorry, or relieved. It was a knot that wouldn't come untied, but it wasn't as tight as it used to be. Over the next few days, I walked differently. Fear was no longer guiding me. It was something new. Maybe it was that courage that Margie always said would come with time. Raina, who always noticed everything, commented in the cafeteria, "You look different. You read it, right?" I nodded. "So? I'm still digesting it." She laughed. "It'll take time, but it's a start." That week, Shirley came to visit. She took me for a walk in a park near the center. As we walked among the trees, I told her about the letter. She listened without interrupting. She only held my arm when my voice broke. "You don't have to get back together," she said. "But if it gives you peace, it's worth a try. Peace. That's what I wanted. Not reconciliation, not a hug, just peace." I wrote again. Not an answer to my mother, but a whole notebook about me. I wrote as if I were talking to someone who had never seen me. I told them everything. From the smell of Gary's workshop to the feeling of stepping into the Nashville bus station for the first time. Margie read a few excerpts. She said it could become a book. I laughed, but deep down, a part of me believed it. A month later, I received another letter, this time from an NGO that worked with survivors' stories. Margie had sent me a text without telling me. They wanted to publish it. They wanted me to talk to other girls. I froze on the spot. Talk? Out loud? As if that was easy? But then I thought, if I've kept quiet for so long, maybe now it's time to break this cycle. If you're still with me, leave a like. This is more than a story. It's my revenge in word form. Tell me, have you ever faced your past head on, even though you were shaking? because some courage is only born when you stop running away. The first time I was asked to go on stage, my legs went limp. It was just a small event at a technical school in the city. Hardly anyone from outside, just teachers, a few students, 2 social workers. No big deal, but for me, it was everything. I spent the night before unable to sleep. I kept rehearsing in front of the bathroom mirror quietly so that the shelter staff wouldn't hear. I didn't want anyone to see how desperate I was, because on the outside I was already firm. But inside? Oh, inside I was still shaking like a leaf. On the day of the event, Shirley went with me. She lent me a flowery dress, the kind she used to preach in on Sundays. She said I would look peaceful. I laughed. But honestly, that's exactly what I wanted to look like. When I got there, I was greeted warmly, nothing forced, people who listened with their eyes. We sat in a circle. When they called me, my name sounded strange over the loudspeakers, as if I were someone else. I stood up slowly. I walked to the front of the room. I picked up the microphone. My hand was sweating so much that it almost slipped. "My name is Cassie," was all I managed to say at first. The rest came in waves. I didn't say everything. I couldn't. But I told what was enough. I talked about the locked nights, the school notes, the backpack that had been packed for weeks, the escape, and how, even far away, fear followed. No one applauded, and I was grateful for that, because at that moment the silence was welcoming, not judgmental. When I finished, I went back to my seat on shaky legs, but inside me, a new strength was beginning to emerge. At the end of the event, a girl approached me. She must have been about 14, deep-set eyes, a shy smile. "You made me understand some things," she said. "Thank you. I understood everything there. The pain I'd been through wasn't going to go away, but it could serve to prevent another girl from experiencing the same thing." The following week, the invitations began. Other schools, community centers, even churches showed up wanting to hear. I chose only the places where I felt it was true. I didn't want a stage. I wanted to be heard. Each time I told it, something inside me reorganized itself. It still hurt. I still cried afterwards, but it was no longer the cry of someone who was falling apart. It was the cry of someone cleaning out the corners of their soul. One day, Margie came with some news. "We got in touch with the community TV people. They want to record your story. Only if you want to, of course." It took me 3 days to reply. On the 4th, I said yes. We recorded it one afternoon in October. I wore the same dress from the event, sitting on an old sofa with the microphone tucked into my blouse. The reporter was kind. She asked slowly. She let me breathe. I didn't say his name, nor his aunt's, much less the city. But I made it clear what had happened to me, what it was like to grow up silent, how much it hurt to see everyone pretending not to notice. When she had finished, she turned off the camera, hugged me tightly, and said, "This is going to reach more people than you think." The story aired a week later. I didn't watch it alone. I gathered the girls from the shelter in the living room. We sat on the floor with blankets and popcorn. They were silent the whole time. Some cried. I just watched. For the first time, I saw myself from the outside. I heard myself, and I understood that I was no longer just the runaway girl. Now I was the woman who survived. 2 days later, Margie called me into the hallway. She had a letter in her hand, Millersville address. "Again?" I asked, laughing humorlessly. She handed it to me. "It's from a neighbor of yours. She says she saw the article and, well, I think you'd better read it." I opened it right there. There were only a few lines. "Cassie, this is Ruth from number 27. I've always seen you go to school. I never knew anything about it, but now that I know, I wanted to apologize for not looking properly, for not asking, for not doing anything." I held the paper as if it were made of glass, because that's what it was. Fragile, late, but true. That night, I dreamt of the old house, but for the first time, without fear. I walked through the empty rooms. He wasn't there, nor the aunt, nor the pain, just me cleaning the floor, opening the windows, airing out the past. It took me almost a year to work up the courage. I had left Millersville behind, but Millersville wouldn't leave me. It came in dreams, in smells, in details, the sound of the truck, Auntie's laughter in the kitchen, the living room rug that scratched my foot, the doorknob in the bedroom. It wasn't nostalgia, it was pending. Shirley always said that certain places need to be visited one last time, just to prove to yourself that you no longer live there. And that's why one day after much thought, I decided to go back. I went by train, alone, without telling anyone. All I took was my backpack, a coat, and my mother's letter in my pocket. I arrived on a cloudy morning. The city looked the same, small, stuck in time. The same newsstand, the same snack bar smelling of old oil. Walking through those streets was like leafing through an album of pain. Every corner carried a memory. But now, instead of sinking into it, I looked at it like a scar, with respect, but without fear. I passed the old school, the peeling wall, the rusty swings, no children there, only wind. I smiled, because that's where my desire to escape began, and it was also where I first heard that I had value. I walked to my aunt's street. The gate to the house was still the same, only more worn. The paint was faded, and the weeds were taking over. She didn't live there anymore. That much I knew. She'd sold everything and moved in with her sister, but I needed to get in. I called the new owner, a nice man who recognized me from the TV report. "Are you the girl in the story?" I nodded. He let me in without asking. The house seemed smaller. The furniture was different, but the walls knew everything. I went straight to the room where I slept. It had become a storage room, boxes piled up, dust, but the space was the same. The window with the crooked lock was still there. I stood there for a few minutes, just breathing. I closed my eyes. I heard the bed creak, the click of the doorknob, the muffled sound of footsteps, everything coming back. But standing there, adult, whole, I wasn't shaking anymore. I went downstairs, thanked the man, and left. I didn't take a souvenir. I didn't take a photo. I just closed the gate firmly, with the certainty that I wouldn't be coming back. Before leaving the city, I stopped at the cemetery. My mother had been buried there months before. I heard about it in a letter. Heart attack, alone, in a rented room. I found the small headstone, simple. No flowers. I knelt down. I took the letter out of my pocket. I burned it right there with a lighter borrowed from the station cafeteria. The ashes danced in the wind, and at that moment, something in me rested. "I tried, Mom," I whispered, "and somehow, I think you tried too." I returned to the big city in the late afternoon, the train cutting through the fields, the window showing everything getting small again. When I arrived at the shelter, Raina was waiting for me with a blanket and 2 coffees. "What's up?" she asked. "It's over," I replied. She didn't need any more. She hugged me. We stayed there, on the sofa, in silence. A few months later, I left the shelter. I went to live in a simple little room near the NGO where I now worked. I helped other girls. I listened to stories. Many were similar to mine. Others were worse. But always with one thing in common: nobody saw. No one asked. With each visit, I remembered 10-year-old Cassie, the one who trembled, the one who cried quietly. And I was grateful to have found people who held my hand when I had let go. Today, at 81, I look back without shame, because I'm not the pain I experienced. I am what I did with it. And if you've come this far with me, thank you. I really do. Every word you read was a piece of me healing, and maybe a piece of you too. If this story has touched you, please leave a like, not out of vanity, but because there are other Cassies out there, and maybe with a click from you, their story will start to change. Tell me, What are you carrying that you haven't yet had the courage to let go of? Because sometimes the secret to freedom is just opening the door with your own hand and not looking back.